You have all probably heard and know something about a place called the Backrooms, but it is unlikely that any of you know where this myth actually came from. Just like this guy did not know 3 years ago. He disappeared in the state of California. They went on vacation with the whole family, set up tents, and while the family was relaxing, the man simply decided to step away to the bathroom.
Who's down there? That makes sense. And what I find really weird is that all these lights are on.
Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. After seeing this video, people in the comments divided into two camps. Some believe that the guy loved the Backrooms so much that he built them with his own hands, and then ran away from his wife and kids. But others think that it is not quite a myth, and that it may be a kind of exit from the simulation. To understand the essence of this story, you need to know a little about how the so-called Backrooms appeared. The first mention of the Backrooms was back in 1989 in California. That year, there was a powerful earthquake that claimed many lives. It is believed that this is when the so-called anomaly was formed. Later, people referred to this story and came up with a game and so on. In other words, it is something like a space-time gap between two worlds, and you can fall into it at any moment, slipping through the textures of our world. The scariest thing here is that time in that world and in ours flows differently. That is, if you end up there, stay there for a year, and then return back here, you will discover that only 3.5 minutes have passed here. In principle, no one would even notice your disappearance, but all this is only an assumption, provable in the same way as horoscopes. That is, not provable at all. But let us return to the story with this man. It all began when Sam Pierce decided to go on a trip with his wife and children. Ironically, they were going to travel across California. Everything happened on the third day of their vacation. They drove up to a cozy lake and, shocked by the aesthetic views, began to set up tents and decided to stay there for the night. While his wife and children were chilling, the husband decided to walk a little farther into the forest to take care of his business. But the strangeness began at that very moment. On the camera recordings, you can see him quickly going deeper into the forest, walking like that for 10 minutes. It all looked like he was walking toward a specific place. That is, most likely, he was looking for something particular. And here is the most interesting part. At some moment, Steve's wife noticed that he had been gone for too long and decided to go look for him. After walking through part of the forest, she realized that he was missing, and she called the police, knowing that she probably would not find him on her own. But then something very strange happened. While the police were on their way, she received a message on her phone with a single video recording. That is, no text, only one video file, which confirmed all her worst fears.
This, I think, was about as far as I got. Check it out. And back up to... Whoa.
Apparently, it seemed to him that he had found the very place he was looking for. But after going inside, he realized that at the very least it all looked extremely strange. When the police arrived, they once again combed the entire forest within a radius of 1 kilometer, but did not find anything resembling what was in that video. Sam Pierce was declared missing, and the case remained unsolved. Naturally, the wife became the first suspect. By the way, that happens most often. When one spouse dies, the other is usually blamed. And often, it turns out to be true. But here is a very interesting point. Do you remember the rule about the difference in time? According to his wife, she noticed her husband's disappearance only after about 20 minutes. Accordingly, in theory, by that moment, her husband could have already been there for 5 years. If you ever liked playing hide and seek and, for example, hid in a closet, then believe me, after this story you will never want to do that again. I think many of you had older brothers or sisters who locked you in a closet for a while. In principle, there is nothing dangerous in that, unless you are locked in a closet for 6 years. That is exactly what happened to this girl. Her name is Lauren Atkinson, and she was kept locked in a closet for 6 years. When she was rescued, doctors were shocked by what they discovered, both on her body and inside it. In fact, the truly terrifying part was not even the condition she was in after that, but how all of it happened and who was responsible for it. Lauren's life had been troubled since birth. She was born, and her mother, Barbara, immediately abandoned her and gave her up for adoption. She was adopted by Sabina and Bill. Strangely enough, those were the happiest days of Lauren's life. Her adoptive parents treated her very well, always buying her clothes, toys, and all sorts of little things. But not much time passed before her biological mother, Barbara, returned and said that she had changed her mind, that she wanted her daughter back. And no matter how much her adoptive parents protested, Barbara managed to take her because the documents had not yet been finalized. Just so you understand, her biological mother Barbara led a very indecent lifestyle. But what she did next was too much even for such people. So, the girl returned to her biological home. And within a few weeks, the madness began. Her mother Barbara often drank, which caused her to constantly lash out at her daughter. When her adoptive parents still visited Lauren at her biological home, they noticed red marks on her body that looked like fresh whip marks. They also noticed blood in the girl's mouth. And when they asked Barbara about it, she simply said it was none of their business. According to Lauren herself, when her biological mother and stepfather got drunk, they started using her as a toy. They beat her and kicked her around the room like a ball, just for fun. She was so terrified that she was afraid to say a word, because it only led to more abuse. At some point, her mother, just for laughs, even started drowning her head in the sink, so that she and her husband could laugh at it. But even that was not the worst part. The real horror is that, when they had no money, they even rented their child, little Lauren, to pedophiles for a certain kind of entertainment. Keep in mind, she was only 3 years old. Naturally, Lauren hated all of this and cried constantly. That annoyed her mother Barbara, and so came the moment when she locked her daughter in a closet and never let her out again for 6 whole years. 3-year-old Lauren spent every single day in that closet. They fed her leftovers from the table, animal food, or sometimes forgot to feed her at all. They let her out of the closet only for 2 minutes a day, and only to beat her for crying inside. Day after day, she lived in that closet, seeing the world only through a small crack. She eventually stopped understanding where she was or who she was. Just imagine how the consciousness of a person deforms when they have no communication with the outside world. She survived only because one of her sisters secretly gave her stolen pet food. One day, it all ended. Barbara had a fight with her husband, and in revenge, he decided to tell Child Protective Services everything. When the police arrived at their home, they were shocked, at least by the overwhelming stench in the apartment, and at most by what they saw in the closet. At that time, 8-year-old Lauren's body looked like the body of a 3-year-old child. She weighed only 24 pounds. Her teeth were broken, her stomach was swollen, and the skin on the back of her body had completely fallen off. Do not forget that for all this time, the closet had been her bathroom as well. Doctors gave Lauren only a few months to live, but a miracle happened and she survived and recovered. You could even say this story ended well, because after that, Lauren went to school, and later both her mother Barbara and her husband were sentenced to life in prison. There is one important fact though. This family had a total of 5 children, and for some reason, only Lauren was treated this way. The other children received attention, and at least were not beaten. But the point is that such events are not unique. You understand that there are plenty of such cases in our world. Perhaps even in your family, there is violence. You must understand that this is not okay, and at the very least you must tell someone, at least your classmates at school. And to such parents, I have only one question. Why do you even have children? You probably all imagine the job of a night guard or watchman, that you simply sit there all night and scroll through the news. That is exactly how this guy imagined it when he got a job as a guard at a school. But he had no idea what he would actually have to guard against.
What is it? Frank!
This man's name was Amir Vascona, or maybe it still is. In 2017, he wanted to support his family and decided to find a job, but unfortunately, because of his lack of skills, the only job he could get was as a guard. Not the worst job for him, you might say, but here is the problem. Amir could not stand the dark and was very fearful. His drinking buddies knew this and often scared him as a joke. But this time, Amir was not in the mood for jokes. Every night he had to stay alone with a huge building and patrol it several times throughout the night with only a flashlight in his hand. According to his wife, on the 4th night he had already begun to get used to it and thought he had overcome his fear of the dark. But believe me, he spoke too soon. Around 2 a.m., Amir heard a strange noise in the hallway, like the creaking of a bed, as if someone were jumping on it. At that moment, he realized he had not overcome any fear at all, and that it would be better to quit this job. But out of duty, he still decided to check.
What is it?
He ran back to his little guard room, locked himself inside, and hoped it was just a bad dream. But then he remembered that he had told his drinking buddies exactly which school he worked at. At that same moment, someone knocked on the door. He opened it, and his laughing friends burst in. After that, the friends left for home, and Amir returned to his post. And that is when the most interesting part began. About half an hour later, around 4 a.m., Amir was dozing in his chair, half asleep, watching the cameras with one eye. With that eye, he noticed some kind of movement. He got up from his chair and started laughing, thinking that one of his friends had stayed behind to prank him again. But when he came closer to the spot, the smile disappeared from his face.
هيا جي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
He was sitting here, in the surveillance room, and what he saw was right there. That meant that whoever or whatever it was had been right next to Amir the whole time, and he had not noticed it. He decided to check again, still hoping it was one of his friends.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ها سمعت الصوت؟ صوت الباب.
Looking at videos like this makes me think that maybe it is time to raise security guard salaries in Mexico. Maybe it was just some school kid, or maybe it really was one of Amir's friends, who never admitted it. The fact remains, Amir never showed up at that school again. So it is better to go to school now as a student than later to have to go back there as a guard.